Hey everybody, we're going to do a little update on my 125 gallon native tank. I got a couple of things in here that I think are worth talking about. I did a pretty big water change today, partially because I wanted to reduce the tannins in the tank. The water was getting really stained and hard to see through. And I also noticed something that concerned me about my spotted tilapia. It looked as though she had some fuzz or some white stuff on her side, which is usually indicative of some sort of fungal infection. And I've got some issues going on in my quarantine tank right at the moment, and one of the fish that's currently in the quarantine tank was ever so briefly in this tank. And so there is reason to believe that it's possible that some kind of contamination from that fish got onto my tilapia there. So I started doing a water change not only to get rid of the tannins, but I also wanted to get the water cleaned up if she's got something going wrong with her. You can see up on her left side, up near her dorsal fin, that kind of white marking. It's two of them side by side there. That's what I'm talking about. And I'm still not 100% sure what I'm looking at, but I can say there's eggs all over the front of that rock, and I can't see around the backside of it, but I'm going to guess there's probably eggs all around the backside of that rock as well. And she seems to be very concerned with that rock and hovering around it. So I think she laid eggs and is now protecting the eggs hanging out in that area. And from my experience, when I've seen fish laying eggs, when they prepare the egg laying site, they may clean it with their mouths and peck it clean, or they may scrape up against it a lot and flash their body against it and use their scales to physically scrape the surface clean. And if that's the case, what we could be looking at could be simply a couple of missing scales or a couple of scratch marks on her side. I don't know, but I'm going to definitely be keeping a close eye on it. I'm leaning towards it simply being some abrasions or some scratched up scales, but I'm not 100% sure at this point. But we will be keeping an eye on that. There's no male in the tank, so those are clearly just unfertilized eggs, and nothing's ever going to become of them. That's not my concern, but I am worried about whether or not she might have a fungal infection or something going on. Like I said, there is a reason to believe that, and we'll talk more about that in an upcoming video. So otherwise, the water change went well enough. I didn't mess with the filter or anything like that. The fish in question that I had to remove from the tank was that small angelfish that I put in here to complement that angelfish back there. And after a few days of being in the tank, I noticed that the angelfish had some cloudy eyes. And so I took it out of the tank immediately and put it over in my quarantine tank, which, again, we will talk about because I've been really struggling with my quarantine tank, and I finally got on top of it and figured out what was going on, and it was interesting. I learned some stuff, so we will be talking about that. Make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss that. Once I got it out of the tank, I kept an eye on everybody, and everybody seems fine, and the angelfish that I took out of the tank didn't show any signs of developing ick or any fungal infections. It just had cloudy eyes, and they actually have cleared up. So that fish is fine, and I wasn't really expecting any kind of, ill effects in this tank. And then this morning I came in, I saw those marks on my tilapia, and so, alarm bells kind of went off and red flags went up, and we're going to, keep a closer eye on this tank again. The other thing I've noticed is the nearite snails I've put in this tank. In theory, there are 5 of them. I don't know if all 5 of them are still alive, but I did put 5 of them in there. You can see one on the rock right there. And for my regular viewers, you might be able to spot the huge difference. But if you're seeing this tank for the first time, all those little sort of spots and specks of green you can see all over everything, they were all over everything. And now they just are not. Even the Anubias, you can see all the sort of dark speckles and spots, and where there's sort of deeper grooves in the leaves, it's darker down inside the grooves. That dark green spot algae, because that's what that is, that's green spot algae, that was covering that Anubias almost completely. And now it's basically only left behind in the places that the snails can't really even get to it. So I am really, really happy with what those nearite snails did for getting rid of that green spot algae. You can see it more clearly, the sort of before and after difference right here. It's only been a few weeks. They're still working on it. But we're already to this degree. And now that the plant is actually getting more light and that algae is being removed, we're getting some new growth. So that one's finally starting to settle in and develop. We're actually starting to get a little bit of new growth off of that rhizome back there. So we should be seeing some more anubias come off of that. And I am seeing root growth off of that anubias, but it's root growth only. I haven't seen any new foliage yet. And that is, you know, keep in mind, anubias is a low light plant, and that's, you know, that's not necessarily what you'd call low light. And it's sitting right there like that. So I don't know how well it's going to adjust. It might take a little bit of time for that anubias to kind of get used to that huge amount of light shining on it. It may not ever get used to that huge amount of light shining on it, but we're going to find out. The other thing I wanted to mention is I noticed the other day, if you'll remember when I collected up my last batch of minnows for the season, I got a few creek chubs in there by accident, and you can clearly see the creek chubs are starting to outgrow all of their little companion fish in there, and it's not going to be long before I start having larger and larger creek chubs and fewer of these little Natropus species. So what I think I'm going to do, I did talk a little while ago about simply letting those creek chubs get big enough to start eating some of those fish, and then in the springtime all I'll have to do is remove a few of the creek chubs. But I think what I'm going to do, just kind of for fun more than anything, is I think I'm going to put my minnow trap in the tank here and see if we can catch some fish with the minnow trap. I might even set the camera up and just let it roll, and you know, maybe we'll get to watch the action of the fish swimming in and out of it. We can even try doing it with and without bait. See if that makes a difference. And who knows, we might learn something about when we throw our minnow trap out in the stream, you know, what's going on with the fish swimming in and out of it. Although I don't suspect I will be collecting any more fish for this tank locally. I think by next spring this tank will be sort of converted over to more of a South American feel to it than all of these little native fish. But we'll have to wait and see. You never know. Anyway, those are my updates. My main concern was the tilapia. And then, of course, I did want to also show that she has laid eggs. That was interesting. And just give everybody a good look at the tank there now that I've got a fresh water change on it and it's all looking nice and clean and pretty. So there you go, everybody. Brief update on my 125-gallon native tank. Make sure you're subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. I will be posting over there more. And then don't forget, of course, this is my 125-gallon native tank. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you real soon.